Story 1. Paul Newman was spectacular in person. His eyes were electric, and his personality exuded a kindness that was palpable. A lovely human being. Story 2. Paul Rudd is super nice in person. He looks exactly like he does on television, except his head is large compared to his body. You can see it when he makes out with a girl who has a normal-sized head. He is absurdly nice to random fans. Story 3. My friend dated Kate Winslet's sister. This was long before Kate became famous. She had done 1 or 2 period television shows but no films. I was at her sister's birthday party. Kate was there. I cannot overstate how exceptionally beautiful she was. She lit up every room and had a huge presence. She was also very lovely and friendly. I worked at Pinewood Studios for about 10 years, and many actors are much shorter than you would imagine. I often checked their biographies afterward and found many listed as 5 feet 10 inches or 5 feet 11 inches who were definitely not that tall. Story 4. Alicia Cuthbert is an absolute showstopper. You do not need to know she is famous. She draws your gaze naturally from both men and women. She was dressed very casually and comfortably, as if having dinner with family. Super classy, yet incredibly special and attractive. Story 5. I met Robin Williams once. He came into our local cafe for a shot of espresso while he was filming Insomnia. Although not tall, he was larger than life and stood with his hands on his hips like in Peter Pan. He was charming and funny and wrote "Espresso yourself" on our wall. He had sparkly eyes. Story 6. In 2000, a good friend of mine was dating a woman who worked at Saturday Night Live. Through luck, we attended the show the first time Dwayne Johnson, also known as The Rock, hosted, and later we got into the after-party. 2 celebrities stand out from that night. I am 6 feet 6 inches tall. I do not know how tall the Big Show is, but he was a full head taller than I was. He shook my hand and his fingers were like bratwursts. Molly Shannon in person has one of the most radiant smiles I have ever seen and is a total sweetheart. She also had surprisingly great legs. Story 7. I met Pierce Brosnan and I did not know humans came in that exact model. Story 8. Chris Hemsworth is somehow better looking in person. We are the same height and I still felt small next to him. Kimbra is tiny and absolutely stunning. Story 9. I met Manny Jacinto, and he is even more handsome in person. I shared a drink with him, which may be one of my greatest moments. I also met Mike Schur and the rest of the cast of The Good Place, and they were some of the nicest people you can meet. Story 10. Once I was at a restaurant in Los Angeles and saw a handsome silver fox dining across the room. I tried not to stare, but I kept thinking how good he looked for his age. I am terrible with facial recognition, so even though I am familiar with his work, it took me 5 minutes to realize it was Ted Danson. Story 11. I met Toni Tennille in 1983. Took me a long time to stop staring at her legs. About 20 years ago, while grocery shopping, I saw Rachel Weisz come around the corner. My jaw went clattering across the floor. Thanks to Isabella Rossellini, the course of my life changed. She was walking out of a shop while I was walking in. I was hoping to woo the woman who ran the shop. I held the door for Isabella. This was 1993, so Isabella was the unattainably beautiful face of Lancome Cosmetics at the time. A woman said, "Wow, that was Isabella Rossellini." I said, "I know. It must have been strange for her, being the second most beautiful woman in the room." Damn. I mean, where did that come from? I had never had game, especially then, but for that one moment I was on fire. Of course, I blew it with the woman later. Story 12. My brother lived in Los Angeles and did some modeling, so he was attractive. He saw Charlize Theron walking out of a movie theater. Their eyes met and she smiled at him. He said the background faded away and he felt dizzy. He could not believe how beautiful she was in person. She was even more striking than in photographs. Story 13. Maybe 10 years ago, I was walking down the sidewalk somewhere in New York. I cannot remember where. A show must have ended at a small theater. And as the audience was coming out, I saw Angela Bassett in the crowd. For a split second, my brain could not process how stunning she was. She looked like she had been chiseled from marble. The cheekbones. She must exude tall energy on screen, because she was much shorter than I had expected. Another time I was at a deli and ran into Paul Dooley. The Paul Dooley-ness is the same in person as on screen. Story 14, Winona Ryder. I never found her particularly attractive, but she is absolutely stunning in person, like a porcelain doll. Story 15. I know that Kylie Jenner has had a lot of work done, but I was shocked at how uncanny she looks in person. From any angle that is not a camera or selfie angle, her features look exaggerated, hard, and shiny. She started getting plastic surgery at such a young age, and it is very sad. Story 16. She is not unattractive in pictures and video, but I was shocked by how beautiful Carly Simon was in person. Story 17. Jensen Ackles is shockingly handsome in person. He made me understand the term stunning. It was hard to breathe around him. He reminded me of a vampire, perhaps for that reason. We did not talk for very long, maybe 20 minutes total. I was not nervous or sexually interested. I was working, so I was straightforward and polite. We made each other laugh a few times. I felt relieved when he left so I could breathe normally again. Story 18. I met Zooey Deschanel. She is tiny and incredibly pretty. Her eyes are enormous and a stunning shade of blue. She was very sweet and genuine. Story 19. I made Margot Robbie a dirty martini last week. She hung out and chatted with me for about 10 minutes. I cannot even imagine what a blubbering idiot I must have sounded like. She was so cool and absolutely stunning in real life. Story 20. Decades ago, my father sat next to Olivia Newton-John on the flight home from Australia. He told us her eyes were gorgeous and that she was a stunner. They talked for much of the trip. She asked most of the questions. When he got home, he could not stop talking about her. My mother rolled her eyes a few times. He bought her greatest hits compact disc, and it sat in his car. Story 21. I ran into Dolly Parton in the early 1990s outside a small local store in Brentwood, Tennessee, where she has her primary residence. I will not use the word less attractive because Dolly is forever the queen, but she looked very different without a wig and heavy makeup. She was low-key and looked like a normal older woman. She was dressed casually but wore platform wedge sandals and was only a little taller than me when I was 10 or 11 years old. She was very small in person, very nice, and gave us an autograph, but she was definitely trying to fly under the radar and avoid being recognized. Growing up around there, I met or saw a lot of famous people locally, but she is still the most famous person I ever encountered. Story 22. Rob Lowe looked as if he were wearing a thick wall of makeup, less like a person and more like an oil painting. I always thought Kate Beckinsale was pretty, but in person she was jaw-dropping. Story 23. I met Henry Rollins after one of his shows. I was surprised at how small he was compared with his larger-than-life tough persona. He was a wonderful person. Story 24. Cate Blanchett was filming in downtown Austin and walked up to a group of people standing near a section blocked off for the shoot. I cannot describe how stunning she looked. She is truly one of the most beautiful people in existence, and her radiance and glow in person were breathtaking. Story 25. I saw Jeff Goldblum in concert recently. He is an accomplished jazz pianist, and he came out half an hour early to do crowd work. He has a big presence on screen, but in person his charm and charisma were palpable. He was funny, confident, and engaging. He felt truly larger than life. Even from far away, he seemed to fill the whole theater with his presence. He is a natural entertainer, hilarious and very good at tickling the ivories. Story 26. I was at a bar in London, and a beautiful woman sat across from me. She was effortlessly gorgeous and tastefully dressed. Upon further inspection, it was Keira Knightley. Story 27. Henry Cavill looks even better in person. Screens and photographs do not do him justice. He is very handsome. Story 28. Scarlett Johansson. My friend and I stood and waited when we were about 13 at the premiere of The Island. When she came up to sign autographs, she was 4 inches from my face and both of us could not stop gawking at her. She was glowing. I cannot imagine how foolish we looked. She was a beautiful and sweet woman. Story 29. Ryan Gosling held the door open for me when I was heading into a doctor's appointment. Not only was he well-mannered, but he was breathtakingly gorgeous in person. I forgot to say thank you because I couldn't find my words. Story 30. You are probably used to Steve Buscemi as the weird guy with crooked teeth and googly eyes in the movies. He is a handsome devil in person. Story 31. I met Aubrey Plaza in my city's grocery store a few years ago and realized she is a completely normal-looking person. Story 32. Lou Ferrigno was a lot less green than I thought he'd be when I met him. Story 33. I saw Alexandra Daddario and Jared Padalecki at the same convention. She looks beautiful on film, but in person I actually stopped in my tracks. She is beyond stunning. It short-circuited my brain. As handsome as Jared is, being about 2 feet away from him was a surreal moment that made me question my orientation for a few moments. He was also incredibly friendly and outgoing. Story 34. The first person who came to mind was Alan Tudyk. He is more of a character actor, and I remember thinking how captivating and attractive he was in person. Story 35. I once met Honey Boo Boo and her mom a little after the peak of their fame. They did not look well. Story 36. I was at a work event with Amal Clooney before she married George. I had seen pictures of her before and thought she was pretty, but I didn't see the attraction. In person, she was the most charismatic person I have ever met. She held every conversation in the palm of her hand. I was absolutely blindsided and smitten. Story 37. Kate Winslet was absolutely stunning when I met her at my job. Her skin was perfect, and she looked like royalty even in regular clothes. She was very nice to me as an employee at a bougie market at the time. She spoke to me and asked how I was doing. In contrast, Meryl Streep was rude. She ignored everyone and looked away if you asked how her day was. She was the worst celebrity I ever encountered. Story 38. Andre 3000 has a powerful aura. He is very handsome and kind. He came to my workplace every day for a couple of weeks and took the time to ask my name and remember me. Story 39. Colin Farrell is in Dublin. Jesus, that's a handsome man. Story 40. I got to spend about an hour with Lana Del Rey after one of her concerts several years ago. She is very pretty in pictures and videos, but that does not do her justice. She is stunning in person. What was funny is that she seems tiny, not physically but in personality. On stage, she projects her voice across the stadium, but when you talk to her, she seems small. She is an absolute sweetheart. Story 41. Christina Hendricks is gorgeous on screen, and in person she made my neck hurt. It was hard not to look at her. Story 42. I met Bill Clinton at a book signing in my store 20 years ago. He was more handsome than I expected. He had a twinkle in his eye and was the most charismatic person I have ever met. Story 43. The skin of Meryl Streep was so luminous that it seemed she had applied crushed pearls. I was very impressed. Story 44. I used to work in a job where I met many minor to mid-level celebrities. Many of them were even better looking in person, and 2 especially stood out. Katrina Balfe from Outlander was attractive on screen, but in person she was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, striking and very sweet. Sean Lowe from The Bachelor did not appeal to me on the show, but in person he was extremely handsome. Story 45. Angelina Jolie looked like a lollipop, very thin with a large head. Story 46. Chris Pine was a regular at my work for years. He was incredibly good-looking in person, better than on screen in my opinion, and very kind, funny, and personable. He was just a normal guy to us. He gave us gifts and a handwritten card for Christmas. Story 47. I worked as a janitor in a building where a few celebrities lived, and the one who stood out most was Christina Ricci. She was beautiful in person and also charming and friendly in a way that never felt fake. I grew up watching Casper and the Addams Family on repeat, so I cannot describe how it felt each time she greeted me by name or stopped to chat for a minute or two in the lobby. Story 48. I was an extra in a Taylor Swift video and saw her up close. She is very tall. Story 49. Gillian Anderson looks unbelievably striking in real life. My jaw dropped. Story 50. I think almost any movie actor looks even better in real life when they are not surrounded by other actors who are all very attractive. My aunt met Brendan Fraser in an elevator years ago and said he was one of the handsomest men she had ever seen. Story 51. I never thought much about Fran Drescher, the star of The Nanny, until I saw her at a fundraiser in 2007. She was one of the most beautiful women I had ever seen. Story 52. How tall is Mariska Hargitay, and how small are Justin Bieber and Jaden Smith compared to 14-year-olds? I worked Justin's wedding, so I have some good stories. Story 53. Daniel Craig, Hugh Jackman, and Ashton Kutcher were very handsome and charismatic in person. I felt Daniel Craig, in particular, having rebooted 007, had clearly been schooled on how to get the most out of a crowd. But there was nothing forced or phony about it. He was so professional and really owned it. Dressed in his Bond wardrobe tuxedo, he was both Daniel and Bond at once. I said something silly when I was surprised to be greeted by him, which made everyone around us laugh. His eyes crinkled and he just went with it. He could have embarrassed me or made it awkward, but he laughed, and I thought, wow. He knew what it feels like as a regular person to meet someone or a character with that popular culture star power. What a lovely man. Story 54. Sam Elliott. I was working at a Western and sporting goods store when he asked for help with a new pair of boots. I helped him and he asked me to show him where something else was. Our policy was to walk customers to the next area or carry purchases to the front, so I walked with him. We chatted for about 30 minutes before he asked if I really did not recognize him or his voice. My not recognizing him is probably why he talked to me for so long. Ron Howard. He was a guest at a hotel on Mackinac Island. Every time he passed the front desk, he said hello to me by name, and when he departed, he stayed to ask me about my winter plans. Story 55. I met Carly Simon on Martha's Vineyard when I was a shallow college student. That woman can level a man with her gaze. Story 56. Emily Rudd is as beautiful as she appears, and her geeky personality and kindness to fans made her seem angelic when I met her at a convention. Story 57. I had a crush on Conan O'Brien in high school and got to see his show when I started college. I expected him to look weirder in person, but he was actually more handsome. I also thought Crispin Glover's unique looks would make him photogenic but odd in person. Instead, he was incredibly handsome. Edit. No one tops Paul Rudd. He is the most attractive person I have ever seen in real life. Story 58. I met J.K. Simmons once while partying in Nashville. I always thought of him as J. Jonah Jameson or the We Are Farmers spokesman. It never occurred to me how incredibly fit he is for his age. Story 59. I sat next to Ted Cruz on a plane and was taken aback by how undefined and lumpy he was, like jello poured into a human mold. Story 60. At a small shop where I worked in 1997, a very thin, short woman came in with prominent teeth. I rang her up. When she left, my coworker said, "Dude, that was Julia Roberts." I am fairly tall, so I do not know how short she actually is. Then, around 2003, I passed Liv Tyler on the street. She looked otherworldly and very fair-skinned. I thought I was in The Lord of the Rings for a moment. Story 61. Peter Dinklage. I was on set for a film as a featured extra in 2022. He is extremely handsome in person, very charming, and kind. Story 62. I have met a lot of famous people, but Rosario Dawson in person was the most beautiful person I have ever seen. Simply stunning. Story 63. Steve Buscemi is gorgeous. I saw him at an art opening, and he is a very handsome man. Story 64. Mike Tyson is much shorter than you would think. Shania Twain without hair and makeup looks like a normal person. Story 65. I once ran into Rachel McAdams and Jake Gyllenhaal at a table tennis place in Williamsburg. She wore sunglasses, so I did not recognize her. Only later did I learn the man with her was Jake Gyllenhaal. I remember taking a break while I was training, looking around, and seeing this woman playing. She made me stop and stare. I had never done that before, and I did not realize I was staring until she saw me and smiled. Later, a staff member told me who they were. Story 66. I walked past Alexis Bledel sitting outside at a restaurant. She was so beautiful she did not look like a real human, especially considering this was in Minneapolis, where you rarely see celebrities. She was there with her ex-husband, who was starring in a play. Story 67. I was a guest at Mimi Shore's memorial a few years ago. She was Pauly Shore's mother, and many famous comedians attended. Two who stood out were Jim Carrey, who was jaw-droppingly handsome in person, and Andrew Dice Clay. The Diceman was not particularly good-looking, but his charisma was off the charts. I was truly starstruck by him and regret not talking to him. Ron Jeremy also attended the event. He looked like a bridge troll and went through the buffet line 3 times. Story 68. About 15 years ago, at the height of her fame, I was in the pool at a fancy hotel in the Bay Area. A woman was swimming with her baby. I was there with my mom, my sister, and my sister's baby. My sister and the other woman chatted about babies for a bit. The woman was nice but looked totally ordinary. Nothing spectacular. I probably would not have looked twice. Turned out to be Amy Adams. She was down to earth and, in person, looked ordinary. Story 69. Here is a slightly different answer to the post's question. David Dastmalchian is a unique, cool-looking person. He appears exactly the same on television, in films, and in online interviews as he does in real life. He is also very nice and down to earth. Story 70. 50 Cent was much shorter than I expected, but he had loads of charm and smelled good. Justin Furstenfeld of Blue October has a magnetic aura that makes him sexy in person. He fills a room and smells good. Story 71. Michelle Pfeiffer from the Batman era walked past me on the sidewalk in New York City. I still think about it from time to time. Imagine the slow-motion girl walks into frame trope, but for real. Story 72. Lyle Lovett is much better looking in person than in photos. Story 73. Nicole Kidman was gorgeous in person and one of the sweetest celebrities I have ever met. At a private party, she was the only person who went over to talk to some fans. She did not have to, but she was that nice. Story 74. I live in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. Last year, I took a friend to Burger King. Sitting behind her was a man I said looked like Richard Gere, as if he had a more handsome brother. Turned out to be Richard Gere. He was filming a period piece in Galt. Story 75. Hayden Panettiere had a permanent scowl on her face in person. Story 76. I met Adriana Lima at a Victoria's Secret fan signing years ago, and she looked even better in person. Absolutely flawless. Like a doll. I thought, wow, is she real? Story 77. I have never met him, but I have always heard that Steve Buscemi is very attractive in person, even though he usually plays unattractive characters. Story 78. Sheryl Crow has always been attractive, but when I saw her in person she was gorgeous personified. She was absolutely magnetic and incredibly glamorous in a white tank top and blue jeans. Story 79. I saw Kate Hudson and Liv Tyler at a Black Crowes show around 2002. There was an amusement park next to the venue. They were being escorted by security to skip the line for the big roller coaster. They looked like movie stars, like characters from a Flintstones cartoon, wearing sunglasses and headscarves as if it were 1957. I also saw Hillary Clinton in 2016 about a foot away. I had never considered her very attractive, but I was surprised by how good she looked in person. Whether you like her or not, she looked important and well put together, and the combination produced a level of attractiveness that does not come across on television. Story 80. I met Salma Hayek when I was 15. She came to Fort Meade for a meet and greet with soldiers. I had just watched Desperado, Fools Rush In, and Wild Wild West. She awakened my interest in Hispanic and Latina women because she is a stunner. Story 81. This is a throwback, but I saw Bruce Springsteen at a mutual friend's memorial service in the 1980s. He has always photographed well, but when young he looked a little rodent-like. In person he was not that tall and he was beautiful. Story 82. Ed Harris. Eyes that pierce right through to your soul with kindness. Story 83. Hozier is widely known to be tall, but it does not hit you until you are right next to him. I met him in a record shop and he is absolutely enormous. He is extremely handsome in an ethereal way. He seemed quite shy and was very kind and soft-spoken. Story 84. I never understood the appeal of Anne Hathaway in the early 2000s during the Princess Diaries era until she came into the store where I worked. She was jaw-droppingly gorgeous. We had many celebrities at that store, but I had never seen anyone with such a clear aura of being a movie star. She was also very sweet. Story 85. Edge, Adam Copeland, is a handsome devil in person. I met him a few weeks ago. Story 86. Hugh Grant looks pasty and unhealthy in person, as if he has been on a serious 3-month drinking binge. Story 87. Polina Porizkova is the most beautiful person I've encountered on Earth and is very sweet. Story 88. In the early 2000s, I was visiting a friend in New York City and went with him to the gym where he and his wife worked out. They joked that you might see someone famous but should not be weird. Sure enough, Sandra Bullock was there, which surprised them both. None of us fully followed the do not be weird rule because she is stunning in person. Story 89. I met Tom Selleck at the height of Magnum private investigator fame, and he was a very good-looking man. Story 90. Lorde has a unique look. I think she looks pretty on camera, but in person she is stunning. Story 91. Rebecca Hall was not on my list of favorite or most beautiful actresses, but when I saw her in person I was stunned. She looked like magic. Story 92. Elizabeth Debicki is stunning on camera and a goddess in real life. Story 93. Penelope Cruz is striking. When you meet her you think she is a very pretty woman, but even in a room full of other famous, attractive women you find yourself thinking she is truly beautiful. Each time you look at or speak with her she seems even more attractive. Angelina Jolie is also incredibly beautiful. Story 94. I was briefly face-to-face with Paul Rudd, and he might have been the most handsome man I have ever seen up close. Story 95. Mila Jovovich is strikingly beautiful in person. I saw her at a restaurant years ago. She wore little to no makeup and looked stunning. Story 96. I saw Cindy Crawford in late 1999 in New York City. She was pushing a stroller toward me, wearing workout clothes, her hair in a ponytail and no makeup. She was the most radiant woman I have ever seen. Story 97. My grandmother loved soap operas and took me to an All My Children Meet and Greet when I was 12 from 1999 to 2000. Mark Consuelos, Kelly Ripa's husband, was there signing autographs. I was not into him or the show, but he took my breath away. I could not look at him because his beauty almost hurt my eyes. To this day, he is one of the most beautiful people I have ever seen. Story 98. I'm a straight man. I did a scene once with Bradley Cooper. I was overwhelmed by his charm and his stunning blue eyes. Story 99. I saw Alex Jones protesting the Bilderberg Group outside the Westfield Marriott. He is very square-shaped. I am not commenting on his attractiveness. I just did not realize how much of a Minecraft block he really looked like, even with all the pictures of him out there. Story 100. By the way, many people here mention the glow some celebrities have. It results from very expensive, ongoing skincare and hair treatments and is not natural. It is the preserve of the wealthy, the money glow. Story 101. I can't say I met her, but I was very close to Anne Hathaway at John F. Kennedy International Airport. I thought she looked amazing, and she was stunning in person. Story 102. Olivia Rodrigo is a friend's relative, and she is definitely prettier in real life. She is very sweet. Story 103. George Michael of Wham was much shorter than I had imagined. Story 104. I met Michelle and Barack Obama once during his presidency and I was blown away. They made eye contact, shook our hands firmly, and were so tall and striking. They exuded confidence, leadership, warmth, and familiarity all at once. I missed them. Story 105. Kate Beckinsale. I was flabbergasted. She genuinely took my breath away. Story 106. I worked at a large, famous toy store on Fifth Avenue in New York. Celebrities came in so often that it became boring. But one day Grace Jones came in. She is breathtaking in real life. Story 107. Trish Stratus was signing autographs in Ireland 20 years ago with John Cena. She was glowing, leagues more beautiful than anyone I had seen in person up to that point. Story 108. About 10 to 12 years ago, I was serving brunch to Jennifer Gardner. When I dropped off her plate, I said, "Wow." Story 109. I met Lonnie Anderson, her daughter Deidre, and Burt Reynolds in 1987. Deidre is pretty in her own right, but next to her mom, Lonnie, everyone else faded. Lonnie was breathtaking. Burt was a major douche. No matter how attractive he was, his attitude made him ugly. Story 110. I never really thought much of Anna Faris until I saw her in person. I was stunned by how attractive she is in real life. Blonde white women are about as far from my type as you can get. But she has a presence unlike anything I have ever seen. Story 111. At the height of Poker Face fame, Lady Gaga stopped at a Waffle House at 3 a.m. I was trying to push down alcohol with grease and eggs. I sat next to her, and people were excited and lined up for her autograph. She looked like a very ordinary person with a slightly large nose. I didn't realize it was her until everyone was talking about it the next day in a small city. Story 112. Diana Ross is a world-class physical beauty up close. Story 113. I have met and hung out with a lot of celebrities in the past when I was a personal assistant, but someone I met recently who really stood out was Charlie Hunnam. It is not just that he is extremely handsome. He exudes warmth and genuine kindness. The way he shook my hand and held eye contact was remarkable, and he has real charisma. The kindness in his eyes made a lasting impression. I cannot imagine how his close friends, family, or girlfriend must feel. Story 114. Eva Green was stunning in photos and movies, but in person she was almost supernaturally beautiful. Story 115. I handed Nicole Kidman a zucchini in Nashville when I worked at a produce stand. She was very tall, her skin shimmered, and she looked even better in person. I saw Gabrielle Union a couple of years ago, and she still looks the same as when she was in Bring It On. She's stunningly gorgeous, and I gushed over her. Story 116. Zendaya looks like a supermodel in person, and Glorilla is also more attractive. Story 117. I worked on the Merv Griffin Show. A lot of the stars of the 1970s were not as hygienic as they appeared on television. Story 118. Miley Cyrus stayed at the hotel where I was bartending for a shoot, so she was there for a while. I would not have recognized her if the staff had not been told she would be our guest. She looked like a strung-out, early 20-year-old. I thought, is this the person that girls are idolizing? She spent a lot of time in the bar with her entourage, eyes bloodshot, but she did not complain or act like a diva. I made sure she received what she ordered and otherwise did not speak to her. Once the bar got busy, I began giving her very slow service because she tipped very poorly. Story 119. I did not meet her, but being front row at a Britney Spears concert on the Femme Fatale tour around 2011, when I was 19, changed how I view magazines, videos, and media in general. Do not get me wrong. She was in shape and is a beautiful woman, but she looked completely normal and human. She had freckles and sun damage, and she jiggled when she moved. It made me realize how heavily Photoshop was used, and it is much worse now. Story 120. Working with celebrities for years, I realized that when they come in before makeup they mostly look normal. I have to say that Brad Pitt up close was nothing like he appears on screen. He had bad skin and bad teeth but a great personality. Story 121. I saw Cameron Diaz up close about 20 years ago. Her complexion was noticeably poor. She looked like the before photo from a Proactive infomercial. Makeup is magic. Curtis Sliwa was surprisingly attractive in person. My husband encountered Brian Baumgartner, who played Kevin on the television show The Office, and said he was very charismatic and attractive. Zoe Kravitz used to come into my old workplace. She was breathtakingly beautiful in person, and I was unprepared. Shia LaBeouf was unimpressive. I do not find him attractive in general, and in person he was even less so. Story 122. In the early 2000s, Jenna Jameson owned and ran a nightclub in Scottsdale. I was not a clubber, but we ran into her on her way to the club, and she was jaw-dropping. Story 123. I do not think she films well, but Sarah Jessica Parker is much prettier in real life. Once I was at a small bar when Claire Danes walked in. She was so gorgeous that the room fell silent for a moment. Story 124. I once got in an elevator, and who do I see but Colin Farrell. He was with his kids, so no one bothered him. He was super polite, handsome, and had an Irish accent. Everyone in the elevator tried not to make eye contact, but we kept glancing at him. Story 125. Rachel Lee Cook is probably the most attractive person I have seen in real life. Story 126. Mads Mikkelsen was even more charming and good-looking in person than I could have imagined. It is one of my happiest memories. Sigh. Story 127. Over the years I met many celebrities through work, but only one was a surprise. Ethan Hawke. I never thought of him as particularly handsome. We bumped into each other at a big charity event and exchanged awkward back-and-forth apologies. He grinned, and the charisma rolling off him hit me like a Mack truck. I have been smitten since. Story 128. I am a hotel chef. In 2014, I had a 20-minute conversation with Harrison Ford about his stay and his meal. He asked if we could prepare boxed lunches for his private plane in a few hours. Basic menu options included beef, chicken, or fish, and he asked about allergies. He was very nice and respectful to my staff. There was no rude celebrity behavior. He looked even more like his public image in person. In a crowded 400-seat restaurant, he stood out. Story 129. I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene at the Detroit airport. She looks even more like a short National Football League linebacker ogre in person. Story 130. I met Donald Trump when he was on The Apprentice and he looked awful. He would probably look even worse now. Story 131. I met Megan Good on a television show set a while back. She was so beautiful I couldn't find the words to say. Story 132. I saw Neve Campbell at a horror convention a couple of years ago and couldn't stop staring. Story 133. Not me, but my dad said Diana Ross was absolutely stunning in person. I have a friend who used to sit in for celebrities at awards shows. I think they fill seats, and she said Sandra Bullock was breathtaking and stood out more than the other stars. Story 134. I worked in the film industry some time ago. Nothing glamorous on my side, but I met several well-known people. The most impressive were Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson. Portman has a quiet charisma that is the same in person and on camera. Johansson was warm and approachable, genuinely charming without forcing it. Hugo Weaving was kind and grounded. Peter Coyote was the same, though I only spoke with him briefly. Jon Favreau was very kind and had a great vibe. Vince Vaughn and Robert Downey Jr. were not what I expected, in a disappointing way. Nothing dramatic, just not the vibe I anticipated. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.